I have dozens of mines at home, but I've loved the impoverished Elwyn for 8 years, from studying to working. When he couldn't afford food in college, I organized competitions to give him prize money. When he was engrossed in medical studies and didn't understand social niceties, I humbled myself to please the hospital leaders, speaking highly of him. But when I collapsed from exhaustion in the operating room, he merely walked past me coldly, holding the hand of a female patient. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." So gentle, but not to me. 8 years of unrequited love is so tiring, I can't do it anymore. So what if Dr. Elwyn finally blooms after so many years? I don't care anymore. Chapter 1. At 7 a.m., at the moment I fainted in the operating room, I remembered that I had performed 13 surgeries in a row and hadn't eaten all day. At this time, Elwyn should be off his night shift, right? I really wanted to throw myself into his arms, to ride with him home, feeling so miserable and wronged. Seeing me collapse, the not yet anesthetized female patient expressed her dissatisfaction. "The doctor fainted, who will perform the surgery on me? What about my severed finger?" "It's just a tendon repair, your hand won't be severed." I slumped in the corner, opening my mouth in vain, as the world before my eyes slowly turned black and white. The next second, I heard Elwyn's footsteps behind me. The man was surrounded by the sharp scent of disinfectant. The moment he appeared, his 6'3" frame seemed almost to touch the ceiling. Even the largest-sized surgical gown looked a bit short on him, revealing a portion of his fair, lean forearm. I was overjoyed in my heart, but he walked past me with his long legs, as if I were a mere air, his eyes devoid of warmth. Indeed, if he touched me, it would not meet the conditions for a sterile surgery. But, even if it were a pet cat or dog at home fainting, wouldn't he say a word of concern? At this moment, the circulating nurse called for help, and they carried me out with numerous hands. When I was lifted, I saw Elwyn holding the female patient's hand, whispering softly, patiently comforting. "Don't be afraid, I'm here, I'll do this surgery." High and aloof as he is, he could be so gentle. How laughable. I've loved him for 8 years and endured cold faces, so what am I? Chapter 2. I heard she was making a fuss about calling reporters, so the director had no choice but to add a surgery for Vicky. Can influencers just get special treatment like this? It made our Vicky faint, she really deserves to die. When I woke up, it was already 10 o'clock. A group of night shift nurses refused to leave, surrounding me and chattering incessantly, making my eardrums almost burst. Seeing me open my eyes, Alva immediately supported me and fed me some brown sugar water. "Feeling better? Don't worry, Dr. Elwyn took over that minor surgery for you, just rest easy." I gave a faint smile, Alva understood instantly, and secretly handed me a key. "Dr. Elwyn is really worried about you, he's so anxious. This is the key to his duty room, he instructed several times to have you rest there." A group of people immediately started to tease, saying that Dr. Elwyn is famously a clean freak, and no one else is allowed to touch his duty room, let alone rest there. Willing to give me the key, this relationship must be extraordinary. I lowered my gaze and said softly. "If he's worried, why doesn't he come to see me himself? That minor surgery should be over by now, where is he?" The people in the room seemed hesitant, not knowing how to respond. After a long time, Alva said awkwardly. "You know that big internet celebrity is special, right? After the surgery, Dr. Elwyn got entangled with her and couldn't get away, but he must be very anxious in his heart." I mercilessly mocked. Is there anyone more difficult than me, making Dr. Elwyn do things he doesn't like? If he didn't want to, no one could force him. I've loved him for 8 years and couldn't manage it. 8 years, and I have never seen Elwyn so gentle. Isn't that enough to explain everything? Why bother, pretending to give me some key? A slap followed by a sweet date, as if I'm easy to coax. Seeing I had recovered, the young nurses left one by one, and I alone pushed open the door to Elwyn's duty room, greeted by a cloying perfume scent. The 20-something square meter small room was filled with simple black and white, yet it had a very sweet incense burning. A few incongruous pink pillows on the tidy dark checkered bed, and 2 little lamb stools hidden under the plain white desk, all exuding a sense of disjointedness. These were all things I had arranged without permission after stealing Elwyn's key. Every time he found out, he would be angry for days, and now I realize he must have truly been disgusted. He had disliked me for a very long time. So that day, I burned everything related to me that I could find in the duty room, not leaving a single item. Just like the love I had given for 8 years, since he didn't care for it, I didn't want it either. Chapter 3. At noon, I encountered Elwyn. He hurriedly ran out from the inpatient department, his delicate and handsome face covered in fine beads of sweat, breathing rapidly and heavily, blocking my way. "Why didn't you rest properly in the duty room?" I calmly looked away. "I wanted to go home." Elwyn frowned tightly and coldly asked again. "Did you touch the things in the duty room?" "I found them unpleasant, so I burned them all. Any problem with that?" Elwyn was stunned for a moment, then with an angry expression, he asked me, "What exactly are you trying to do?" At that time, the patient was on the operation table. "I know, of course the patient is more important." I interrupted him, smiling as I retorted. "Why are you so anxious? Do you feel sorry for those things?" I then opened my wallet, randomly picked a bank card, and stuffed it into Elwyn's chest pocket. "Take it and buy yourself new ones. The rest, consider it compensation for the mental suffering I've caused you over these 8 years." The man looked at me in astonishment, rare panic flashing in his deep eyes, quickly replaced by anger. A hint of red crept up to the corners of his eyes, shouting cold anger like deathly silence. "What do you mean?" "Got bored. From now on, love whoever you want, it's none of my business." Chapter 4. Where did things go wrong with Elwyn? I shouldn't have been so suspicious, just because of a female internet celebrity whose name I couldn't even recall. But I felt wronged. Back in college, when I first pursued Elwyn, running a fever of 40 degrees and seeking a comforting word, he only coldly mocked my fragility. Later, when I followed Elwyn into orthopedics, enduring sleepless nights in the operating room, drilling until my hands trembled, unable to even hold chopsticks. Elwyn never spoke a soft word, only scolding me as deserving it, saying that orthopedics was no place for a girl. His love for me was extremely stingy, yet he was generous to a stranger. Why? This man really wasn't worth it. I lived very close to Elwyn, intentionally renting a house next to his at the beginning of the year for a convenient ride every morning. The first weekend I set boundaries with him, I deleted all his contact information and drove to work in my own Porsche. That Monday clinic, Elwyn arrived very late. Passing by my consultation room, he slowed down, his handsome face cold and aloof, yet his dark eyes couldn't help but glance into my room several times. I looked at him indifferently. "Do you need something?" Elwyn pursed his thin lips slightly, his expression somewhat uncertain, glanced at me a few times before turning and leaving. However, at noon sharp, he appeared at my desk with lunch and porridge. I thought I wasn't there, but I was just kneeling on the ground picking something up, and when I stood up, our eyes unexpectedly met. His eyes flickered, quickly looking away, putting on that icy demeanor of keeping strangers at bay. "Alva sent you lunch. You made it yourself, right? Your hands are injured." I mercilessly pierced through him. Elwyn subconsciously clenched his right hand, awkwardly stuffing it into his pocket. But the next moment, I said, "Too bad, I'm allergic to cilantro, don't like shrimp, and especially hate kidney beans in porridge. You see, I can remember everything you like to eat, but after 8 years, you don't even know what I'm allergic to. We really don't need to continue this." Elwyn looked at me calmly, wanting to explain something, but couldn't find the words, massive waves crashing through his heart, leaving him nowhere to hide. I coldly smiled. "I won't eat it, take it away. Suit yourself, if you don't want it, just throw it away." Chapter 5. I don't like being manipulated at all. From now on, Elwyn was no exception. I won't indulge him anymore. Instead of throwing away the lunch, I took it to the hospital ward to see that little internet celebrity, Ruth. As expected, Ruth didn't hesitate to assert her dominance. "Can't you see that Elwyn is different with me? Sooner or later, he'll be mine. You, a female doctor, insisting on staying in orthopedics, what are you really thinking?" "I know it all. I don't want my future husband and his colleagues always being eyed by a scheming woman like you. Leave on your own. I can ask around about which hospital you want to go to. I can't guarantee success, but I'll try. I slowly put down the lunchbox, smiling as I asked her. What if I don't leave? I haven't done anything wrong, so it won't be easy to make me leave, right? You, a newly graduated doctor, how many years has it been and you can already afford a Porsche? Didn't you receive many red envelopes? If I report you, do you know what the outcome will be? I nonchalantly cracked my fingers. Buy a Porsche and need to receive red envelopes? My grandmother doesn't even drive a car this low-key to buy groceries. But today, I didn't come to argue with her. I pushed the lunchbox towards her, saying, "This is the lunch Elwin made for you." Ruth was surprised for a moment, then immediately picked up the chopsticks with a smile. Did Elwin really make this himself? I smiled without answering, took out a pen, checked a few places on her hospital bed, and handed this patient over to Elwin. Not long after, Elwin appeared outside the ward, his face darkening as he fixed his gaze on the lunchbox in Ruth's hands. I calmly waited for the nurse to sign off, facing the man's hollow angry gaze. I smiled indifferently. Well, I'm leaving. You two can chat and enjoy your meal. Later, I heard that on that day, Dr. Elwin threw away Ruth's lunch himself, flew into a rage, and crazily performed 13 surgeries in a row. Each one perfectly terrifying, like a tireless robot, for reasons unknown to anyone. Chapter 6. The next morning shift, I was stopped at the door by Elwin, who had stayed up all night. His eyes were red, and he spoke bitterly. 13 surgeries, I almost forgot how I managed to pull through. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry when you fainted. I looked at him calmly. What were you doing all this time? Don't you have a heart? Do you need to redo everything to know how to choose? Elwin rubbed his forehead hard, his slightly hoarse voice trembling slightly. I was just in a bad mood that day, and you misunderstood Ruth. Can we not rush things and talk it over? A surge of anger rose in my heart, and I slammed the door hard and left. However, reality didn't allow me to break it off with him so cleanly. I refused to say another word to Elwin, and he worked like a maniac, almost not eating or drinking, constantly in the operating room. Even the nurses were scared, asking if I had a fight with Dr. Elwin. He was a national award-winning prodigy and the beloved disciple of the top expert in the department, yet he was torturing himself like this. The head of the department was the first to find me. The chief ordered me to persuade him, to apologize for whatever reason, not to let him harm himself. What can't you do for him? The entire hospital leadership has heard you shamelessly praise him. You drank until you had a gastric perforation at a gathering for him, but you can't make up after a fight? What if his health deteriorates? I actually chuckled in anger, but I deserved it. I had turned myself into his accessory. How could I expect others to look at me differently? Elwin succeeded. He really was disgusting. Chapter 7. When I stepped into his duty room again, the sickly sweet scent of perfume lingered as strong as ever, if not stronger than before. The whole room was cold and monochromatic when I looked around. Elwin had just been escorted back from the operating room, lying alone in bed with his head gently resting against a pink plush toy that I had missed. Strands of hair fell on his pale, gaunt cheeks, exuding a sense of cold, shattered loneliness. I stood quietly at the door for a few minutes, and he remained sleeping with a furrowed brow. I lost my patience. Have you had enough of pretending to be smart? If you have something to say it now. I can tell when you're faking sleep. Elwin clenched his right hand into a fist, half sitting up, and handed me an envelope from the drawer. Sorry, I had to give you something. I managed to get tickets to the concert through a friend, the one you've mentioned many times. Oh, right, there was that thing. I've liked Martin since elementary school and always wanted to take my loved one to listen to him sing love songs. To hint at Elwin, I always playfully complained to him that I couldn't get tickets, that they were precious, and going to Martin's concert with my loved one was my dream. What did he say? Every time, he said I was childish, wasting money, not interested, and so on, delaying things. It had been delayed for so long that I no longer cared about this insignificant dream. On the May 1st, do you have time? I don't have time, are you crazy? He seemed unable to distinguish between what was important and what wasn't, pretending to be affectionate and all. Our relationship had deteriorated to this point. He used despicable means to force me to meet, just to get some small favors to make me turn back. Did he think I was stupid? Chapter 8. Elwyn's face changed in an instant, stunned and at a loss for words. I came to warn you. It's true that I'm not treated well in the department. You can manipulate things to gain the upper hand in public opinion, but don't forget, I've been working diligently at the hospital from 9 to 5 all because of you. If I stop loving, what's the point of caring about these things? I could just resign and go back to inherit the family fortune. I immediately turned to leave, but his cold, large hand tightly grabbed my wrist. It's not what I intended. Can't we calm down and talk about this? I don't not love you, and Ruth is just a sister. What kind of good sister was worth him being so biased towards and loving her like crazy? He didn't know that during these days when he didn't see Ruth haunted me day and night. Ruth sat outside my outpatient clinic all day, staring at me greedily and bluntly but not saying a word. She followed me on my way home, rummaged through my trash, and even if I called the police, they couldn't catch her. It was as if from me, she could find Elwyn. Your good sister is outside the door. Please, go have a good time together, okay? I was so angry that my whole body trembled. Just a few steps away from leaving the duty room, I found Ruth hiding in the corner trying to eavesdrop. She was following me again, coming up through the secure passage. I pulled the cowering Ruth into the duty room and shoved the concert tickets into her hands. Dr. Elwyn invited you to go see it. Couple ticket. Chapter 9. Ruth is always just a well-behaved little rabbit in front of Elwyn, trembling at first, unbelievably picking up the envelope. The next second, Elwyn raised his hand and snatched it, tearing the envelope into pieces without hesitation. You said it yourself, Martin's concert is meant to be listened to with your loved one. And for me, that person is you. I smirked coldly, turned back to look at him with a hint of pity. Well, that's unfortunate. I can go with anyone. Do we still need to be bound to attend a concert in 2023? If you tore up the tickets to show off to someone, was it to go to the concert? Then I'll have Martin come and sing for free, and we can all go listen, right? Ruth, who was almost in tears, heard my words and a sly smile curved her lips. Can we? Elwyn, I also really want to listen to Martin's concert. A hint of embarrassment flickered in Elwyn's eyes, slowly closing them, his pale lips pressed tightly together without saying another word. Chapter 10. Martin's concert added a last-minute performance, and unbelievably, the whole venue was free. The sports stadium was almost deserted on the weekend. Ruth naturally wouldn't miss it. She was just an actress who didn't earn much money, finding it hard to get a ticket to see Martin. Seeing my gaze lingering behind her, Ruth confidently smiled. Elwyn will come. He just got held up with something, but he promised to come with me. What was I really hoping for? Vicky, snap out of it. The audience on the second floor increased, and Ruth was pushed towards me by the crowd. In that moment of lowering her eyes, the youthful innocence in her eyes faded, revealing a sinister glint like that of a snake or scorpion. You and him really don't match. Those 2 tickets were scalped for a 6-figure sum. He actively asked me to contact someone to buy them, but you tore them up without even looking at them, trampling on his dignity like that. Is there any room left for a turnaround? Would you mind hearing another secret? Ruth tiptoed closer to my ear. Elwyn and I are about to become siblings. His mother has been eyeing my father for 8 years like a dog guarding a big piece of meat. I'll also be with Elwyn. His mother had a child for my father, and I'll have a child for Elwyn. We'll all be so happy as a family. As Ruth spoke, Elwyn happened to appear at the stairwell, dressed in black denim, his tall, slender figure slowly walking towards me against the light. Even though I couldn't see his face clearly, after 8 years, I was already very familiar with his features. But at this moment, I felt like this man was a complete stranger. No wonder for these 8 years, he never spoke about his family and unreasonably favored Ruth. Maybe I really don't understand him. Ruth had anticipated Elwyn's approach, smiling as she forcefully pushed me into the crowd. So, what are you going to use to compete with me? Chapter 11. Elwyn probably had something to say, but I was pushed into the crowd behind me, jostled away from him. Vicky. Brother, there are so many people here. Shall we go over there? I feel so suffocated with this crowd in my chest. Ruth swiftly threw herself into Elwyn's arms, blocking his entire line of sight. I was forced to walk quite far until the edge of the stairs, when a strong force pulled me back firmly. Turning around, deep down I hoped it was him, but all I saw was a stranger's face. And not far away, Elwyn held Ruth tightly in his arms, moving further away with the crowd, not even bothering to look for me. Vicky, aren't men just like this? In the days to come, every second spent thinking about him is a waste. Chapter 12. We didn't even finish the concert later, as we were suddenly called back due to an emergency. There was a multiple car collision in the suburbs, and some of the injured were urgently brought to our hospital. When Elwyn and I rushed into the emergency room, it was already chaotic with rescue efforts. The head nurse looked up at me and exclaimed, "Oh my, Vicky, were you robbed? Your clothes are all torn?" I had to exert a lot of effort to escape from the audience seating, my hair a mess and my shirt ripped in several places. I was just worried about rescuing the injured, not paying much attention to my appearance. As soon as she finished speaking, several ambiguous glances were immediately cast towards me. Put this on. Elwyn quickly walked past me and a denim jacket with a faint scent of tobacco fell on my shoulders, covering me. I shrugged off the jacket like an explosive, not even acknowledging him. Throughout the journey, Elwyn didn't show any concern when Ruth was around, and now he's trying to act like what? Chapter 13. Elwyn frowned deeply, about to speak, when I suddenly coldly tore off the shredded hem of my shirt and boldly rushed in to participate in the rescue efforts. Oh my, Vicky, why? These are all male patients, isn't she afraid of being seen? How can a girl not take care of herself? Taking advantage of the chaos, Ruth sneaked outside the emergency room to peek, intentionally covering her mouth and loudly exclaiming when Elwyn passed by. I couldn't hold back, grabbing a roll of gauze and throwing it towards the door. Idle people, get out. Several nurses coldly went to close the door and shoo people away, but Elwyn suddenly went crazy, rushing to my side and competing to put oxygen masks on patients, shielding me. His arm trembled slightly, as if suppressing anger, lowering his voice to instruct me. Go change your clothes. What does this look like? I ignored him completely, turning to read the CT scans, diagnosing quickly. Vicky, I'll say it again, go change your clothes. The next moment, because Elwyn was too busy talking, the patient he delayed giving medicine to slowly flatlined. Chapter 14. Dr. Elwyn, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? In the blink of an eye, Elwyn finally reacted, flustered but orderly cooperating with the internal medicine team for the rescue. I stood stunned for a few seconds, the first time feeling so speechless towards him. And at that moment, a faint voice came from outside the door. Darling, darling? Are you busy? I turned to the sound and to my surprise, it was my father outside. Dad, it's just a minor injury, can you take care of it later when you're not busy? That boy, is he your boyfriend? He doesn't seem that great to me. At that moment, the patient next to Elwyn failed to be rescued and was covered with a white cloth. In fact, the person was already severely herniated when brought in and was being kept alive solely by machines, with very little chance of recovery. But my dad only saw him for a moment and naturally thought it was Elwyn's fault, frowning at me and saying, "How did he end up killing the patient?" Elwyn looked puzzled, staring towards the door. When our eyes met with my dad, his hand hesitated in midair, unsure where to place it. I stood expressionless between the two of them. Dad, I broke up weeks ago, stop making a scene. Chapter 15. After they quickly classified the wounded, those with minor injuries like my dad were temporarily assigned to Elwyn. I had to settle him in first, then focus on participating in the critical care in the operating room. However, when I returned after a few hours, my dad was still sitting motionless in the corridor. Alva, sweating profusely, knelt down to disinfect him, angrily reporting to me. He said the injuries weren't serious, let Dr. Elwyn deal with other things first, and our Dr. Elwyn went off to take care of his little lover. Just now, a patient couldn't be saved, and Dr. Elwyn lost his composure for the first time ever. It's a long story, but Ruth managed to calm Dr. Elwyn with a few gentle words. I wonder where the two of them went off to have fun. I smirked repeatedly, not surprised at all, rolling up my sleeves to treat my dad's wound. My dad, left hanging for hours, wasn't upset at all, still smiling and praising me. I always said you were right to study medicine. Our family has been miners for generations, and you're the only college graduate. I originally came to the hospital to find someone to help you out, but it turns out no one in the family has any connections. Luckily, you made it on your own. I awkwardly chuckled. My family only became affluent after 2000, and I was the only university student in the family, naturally the pride of the family. Although I often talk about going back home to live off my parents, deep down I want to build my own career. Returning like that would be embarrassing. So I continue being a doctor, not just because of Elwyn. By the way, why do you smell like braised pork? Did they serve that in the operating room? Get one for Dad too. Alva and I both froze in shock. The smell of braised pork in the operating room was not something to dwell on. Uncle, they didn't serve any extra food in the operating room. Elwyn's cold voice came from behind. He seemed to have rushed back all the way, sweat-soaked hair sticking to his cheeks, chest heaving. Entering the corridor, he didn't stop and went straight to my dad, helping with the wound cleaning, explaining as he disinfected. Boiling bones for sterilization is a common method used in surgery. Today, we had a patient with a skull fracture, so the bone was boiled a bit too long. Alva gagged and left, very grateful for his blunt explanation. My dad's smile froze as he thought, his face looking as if he had just eaten a fly, probably not in the mood for meat recently. However, Elwyn seemed completely oblivious to the awkward atmosphere. After dressing the wound, he politely asked my dad. Sorry for the delay earlier due to some personal business. Are you hungry? Let me treat you to a late-night snack. How about some braised pork? 8 years later, Elwyn's emotional intelligence was still so low it made people want to curse. I rolled my eyes and tried to help my dad leave. But my dad stopped me with a smile on his face. All right, let me treat you to a meal, Uncle. Vicky is usually delicate and has caused trouble for you colleagues in the hospital. Her fiancé happens to be on the way. Who else from your colleagues is here? Let's all have a meal together. As soon as he finished speaking, both Elwyn and I were stunned. My dad innocently explained to me. I just heard you broke up several weeks ago. This matter was only settled last week, so it's not considered interfering with a third party, right? Let him meet you for a moment. If there are no issues, just get the certificate. I found him according to your requirements, all smart and outstanding, dangerous big wolf dogs to strangers. You'll meet him in a bit. He's still a chef, so you won't go hungry anymore. In an instant, the color drained from Elwyn's face. Chapter 16. My CPU exploded. It really is my own father. What is all this about? Although it's satisfying to see Elwyn getting angry because of the sudden appearance of a fiancé, what is all this about marrying a chef? A chef, huh? Elwyn lowered his eyes, the curve of his lips colder than snow, even carrying a hint of arrogance. I'm afraid marriage is out of the question. No matter who you marry, you should always ask for Vicky's opinion. My dad casually tapped on his phone. He was found based on her requirements. She said if all conditions are met, she'll marry. Yes, in the past, to warn my dad, I said I changed men like changing clothes, only wanting someone handsome and smart, using Elwyn's good qualities as a benchmark for a partner. I created a perfect fake person. Never did I expect. He actually found someone exactly like what I asked for. My dad then bluntly said, "Why can't my daughter get married? If she won't marry others, should she marry you?" Which mines does your family own? What group? My family has no mines, uncle, you're right. A sarcastic curve appeared at the corner of Elwin's thin lips. His long eyelashes swept down slightly, his eyes devoid of any emotion, only indifference remained. Because Elwin came from a humble background, in the 8 years we've been together, I rarely directly mentioned money matters, and every expense with him had to be carefully calculated, delicately maintaining his self-esteem. Now, without me, this thing seemed even more fragile than glass, shattering with just a touch. Without even lifting an eyelid, my dad said to Elwin, "No mines, what's the point? Mismatched background will wear you out sooner or later." Chapter 17. Although it was supposed to be a meal, my dad was called away by a phone call as soon as we left. He only had a minor scratch and had to rush back to deal with work. He had booked a nearby Japanese restaurant from the hospital for us to go to. After we were seated, I pretended to smile lightly and said to Elwin, "It's fine, I wasn't sure how to face that chef, but now that you're here, I feel more at ease. Let's consider this meal as a farewell, the three of us getting to know each other, then going our separate ways in the future." Elwin probably wanted to say something, and I hoped he would, but his lips trembled slightly. The words he was about to say seemed particularly difficult, leaving only bitterness lingering in his mouth. "Do as you please, it's your business." I immediately dropped my chopsticks, resisting his strange attitude with my actions. Elwin carefully reached out and held my hand. His side profile still sharp and cold, but now devoid of the sharpness. "Sorry, maybe I have many shortcomings, but I also love you. For these 8 years, I've been too focused on other things, occasionally neglecting you. I was afraid to stop, scared that if I did, I wouldn't be worthy of you anymore. Do I need your family to have mines? Do you truly love me? Why is it that you haven't said a single kind word to me, favoring Ruth in everything?" Elwin's voice hoarse, he spoke bitterly. "There's a reason for Ruth, From start to finish, you've been treating me badly, we have issues between us, and you're trying to explain about Ruth? Even if she were Fan Bingbing, what does her not hearing a single nice word from her boyfriend in 8 years have to do with you?" Elwin stood still, looking somewhat lost. When the atmosphere became extremely tense, a playful voice came from behind. "Sorry, have you lovebirds finished quarreling? When can I join this late-night supper?" Chapter 18. The man walking towards us was tall, probably around 6 feet 3 inches. The somber black suit outlined his slender waist, his facial features sharp and clean, with eyes slightly light, softening his overall look. No need to ask, just by the resemblance, one could guess that he was the chef my dad found. The man sat down with a faint smile, asking Elwin, "I've been listening from the back for a while. Is she really your girlfriend? How did you endure these 8 years?" Elwin's eyes darkened, not even bothering to look at the man directly. "Please leave, our private conversation isn't over." The man's lips curved into a charming smile. "I'll leave then, but settle the bill, this meal costs 8,000. How much longer do you want to talk? You've spent 8 years with a girl without figuring things out, a few more minutes won't make a difference. You seem quite interested in other people's fiancés, as if you can win them over in just a few minutes." Listening to each word, Elwin's face grew darker and he suddenly looked up, his deep eyes tinted with a hint of blood. "Please." The man calmly smiled and interrupted him. "Just a reminder, your phone that was charging at the front desk for saving money just rang. It's marked as the director's call, maybe you should go check it?" Elwin was taken aback, frozen in place. Although his body didn't move, his hand instinctively reached for the table's edge, ready to stand up at any moment. Yes, a familiar gesture. Physically present but mentally absent. Mentor, director, work, even Ruth, even just a phone call, anything was more important than me. I remained silent, the chef didn't say another word, and Elwin boldly got up to get his phone, walking away without looking back. Before leaving, he scanned his phone twice and settled the bill. The man in front of me suddenly spoke, catching my attention. "I'm Paul, supposedly the big wolf dog you requested. Your dad personally approved." I am embarrassed beyond words, holding a full cup of tea and awkwardly shoving it into his hand, silently begging him to shut up. He skillfully caught the scalding teacup, and as he looked up, his eyes met the smiling face of the man. Just teasing you, but unlike him, I'm not as busy. I have plenty of time to spend with you slowly. Your ex-boyfriend seems to have no filter, but I'm different. I have 8 filters, won the citywide comedy competition in elementary school. Most importantly, heart, mouth, in harmony. I gazed at him steadily, not reacting or speaking. Paul was not in a rush, the warm light enveloped us, and he gradually revealed a gentle smile. It seems like today isn't the right time to talk about this, so let's discuss something else. With that, he casually unbuttoned his suit jacket. Underneath was a crisply ironed gray pinstripe shirt, but the hem was abruptly cut short, with frayed edges hanging in an unintentionally comical way. Paul raised his chin at me, his sharp jawline not at all menacing, exuding a hint of sophistication. I see you're also wearing these ragged clothes, pretending it's some kind of youth trend, right? I paused, then glanced down at my shirt with the frayed edges, and chuckled with a headache-inducing smile. Yet, in these past few months, it was my only laughter. Chapter 19. Not long after that day, my deputy director who took me under his wing was about to retire. When Elwin and I both entered the department, being the rare genius that he was, all the directors fought to have him as their apprentice. As for me, only a soon-to-retire deputy director was willing to take me in. With no specific research direction and no qualifications to handle complex cases, I was left with little to do. Now, as the deputy director was retiring, he suddenly remembered that he hadn't arranged anything for me. He asked about it during the morning meeting. The experienced directors all remained silent, pretending not to hear him. Elwin, too, stayed silent. This time, I was used to it. As long as I didn't make any mistakes at work, they couldn't fire me. And in a few years, I would have the ability to establish myself. After enduring the awkward morning meeting, as we finished our rounds, Elwin suddenly stopped me. Seemingly with great determination, he said to me, "I want you. The title will come soon, and I'll put some of my research under your name. Just wait for me a few more days, and in the future, I'll secretly take you with me without the director knowing." I saw Elwin's eyes light up as he spoke, as if he were a savior. But what I cared about was there no one else to guide me? Had he truly acknowledged my abilities? During my most awkward moments in the morning meeting, he didn't say a word. When I was treated unfairly, he just watched coldly. When I needed him the most, he was always nowhere to be found. Aren't you unhappy? This is all I can do now. Even though it can't be discovered by the director, you have everything you need. I didn't know what to say, but my heart was strangely calm. I patted his shoulder quietly and left without saying a word. When I first started working, I had cried to Elwin about my grievances, but he had said he was powerless. He couldn't choose me in place of the director, and besides, entering the orthopedics department was asking for trouble. He has changed now, but he doesn't know that I never asked him for help from the beginning to the end. I just wanted a comforting word from him, a supportive attitude. He never understood. After the rounds were over, I started my night shift as well. Paul has been picking me up lately. Once I got into the car, he didn't start it right away. Instead, he turned his head and asked me, "Are you unhappy? Did Uncle waste your time and annoy you again?" Due to my father's reasons, we had to be bound together to make it look good. He was 5 years older than me, and after getting familiar, he always took advantage of me and called himself uncle. I ignored him, closed my eyes, and leaned back on the chair to rest. Paul wasn't upset either. He unpacked hash browns, lattes, handmade cakes, all placed around me. My family used to have a little stray cat. I never knew what it thought about every day, so I tried little by little. For example, do you like the cake Uncle made? Do you like this stardust? Is it good to go to the mountains to soak in hot springs with Uncle on weekends? Shut up, you're just an old straight man. I opened my eyes, picked and chose, only taking the hash browns and bit into them angrily. As I chewed, tears welled up in my eyes. Paul's large hand landed on the top of my head, gently rubbing it a few times, and said with a smile. I could see you were feeling wronged, but I don't know the reason. It's okay, it's no big deal, it's all their fault, they're really mean to bully my little friend. Uncle will support you. I embarrassingly pushed his hand away, looked out the window, but the tears kept flowing uncontrollably. It's a sad reality. Some people, no matter how hard you try, even if you've laid your heart bare for them, they won't even look at it, won't understand a thing. While some people, just a subtle expression can capture your thoughts, even without saying a word, you can understand each other. Chapter 20. On Friday night, I suddenly received a message from Lennon. Vicky, do you know Ruth? Elwin added her to the group a few months ago. Just now, Ruth added each of us as friends, saying she's going to marry Elwin. What's going on? Lennon was Elwin's roommate during his school days. Elwin, proud and reclusive, had only a few friends in total, and even less contact after starting work. As for me, a few years ago, seeing him being reserved and keeping to himself even with colleagues, I was worried that he had no social life. I took the initiative to reconnect Lennon and them, occasionally sending red packets to stay in touch. At this moment, Lennon was complaining to me again. We've known each other for 6 years, and Elwin didn't even add you to the group. Where did this Ruth come from? The answer to a woman worthy of his blatant favoritism isn't hard to see, is it? She's saying she's getting married, why ask me? When it's time for the wedding, stand in for me as a groomsman, then I won't go. After sending the message, I transferred 88888 to Lennon and ignored him. Originally feeling a bit down, Paul's chat box suddenly popped up with an advertisement. Come to this hot spring and play with adorable puppies. Aren't you going? Really not going? If you don't go, Uncle will go play with the dogs alone. I heard their golden retriever is especially gentle and good. Elwin is allergic to cat hair, so strict that I can't keep any small animals, let alone touch him with pet hair. Because of him, all my hobbies became worthless. So that weekend, I accepted Paul's invitation to go to a hot spring hotel, posted 3 moments with location tags and photos of small animals in my circle of friends. Although it was just a leisure trip, Paul took the opportunity to introduce his friends to me one by one. Among them was a doctor surnamed Sheen, who frankly mentioned that he had seen my resume and chatted with me about many surgical topics. He understood that I was underutilized at the hospital, so he forwarded an English paper to me on his phone and asked for my opinion. Later, I found out that his name was Qin Jingchuan, one of the top 3 experts in the country. Paul casually explained. I just felt that you weren't very happy at the hospital, so I thought Uncle and his doctor friends could chat with you and make you happier. I should be happy. No one cares about my joys and sorrows except for my parents. Elwin hasn't cared for 8 years. It turns out being loved feels like this. That early morning, Elwin actually found the hot spring resort. The summer night breeze was gentle, but it made him look extremely disheveled. He stood outside my room's courtyard, with a wry smile on his face, no color in his complexion, and no hint of light in his eyes. What does the red envelope mean? Did I say we were getting married? It was Ruth who took my phone and added herself to the group chat. I haven't spoken in that group chat for years, I had no idea. Ruth won't bother you anymore, she can only be my little sister. If she refuses, then even family ties should be cut. He wanted to come closer, but because I was covered in cat hair, he stopped abruptly outside, just looking at me with despair. There seemed to be a suffocating hole in my heart that only I could fill. I finished my day shift at midnight, saw your message, and came to find you as soon as possible. I drove for 3 hours without even stopping to drink water. Is it clear now? What else do I need to do for you to forgive me? It's quite clear. But I also have the right to refuse. I don't owe you, and I don't want to wait for you in the same place anymore. Chapter 21. On the return journey, with heavy dark circles under my eyes, Paul tacitly didn't ask anything and just handed me a small milk cat when I got off the car to go home. It was the one I played with a lot yesterday and hesitated about whether to keep. Give it a try, Uncle made the decision for you. If you can't take care of it, just ask me, I have experience. People should be more straightforward. For example, if you keep hanging out in a circle that doesn't belong to you, after a long time, you'll find that it's all heartache, and you shouldn't have to face all that. I noticed you always look down. When will you look up and see the people around you? Even in the worst case, there's still a suitable match. I silently pondered his words and slowly made a decision in my heart. During clinic hours the following week, a middle-aged woman with leg pain took my appointment. She carried a Gucci bag but wore open-toed canvas shoes, described her symptoms in a jumbled way. And despite multiple examinations showing nothing wrong, she simply refused to leave by noon. She closed the door and suddenly revealed a strange smile. Chapter 22. You are the treasure my son has hidden for 8 years, right? The eerie laughter sent chills down my spine instantly. I put down my pen, eyes full of caution. The middle-aged woman was named Caitlin. She circled around my desk, playing with my ballpoint pen, giggling incessantly. Indeed, a rich girl from a wealthy family. My son, for you, sent Ruth to Indonesia to study musicology. He even wanted to have me admitted to a mental hospital. Our family is falling apart all because of you. I am his biological mother. He has driven me to the streets like a mad woman. I've worked hard my whole life, and he ruined everything. All for you, oh Vicky, why should I endure this? I furrowed my brows sharply and called security. Caitlin's tears suddenly disappeared. She tidied her hair while sitting in front of my desk, regaining her composure. I'm here to tell you, no matter how dirty I am, I'm Elwyn's biological mother. Since he has ruined everything for me, I will be entangled with you for the rest of my life. When you marry into the family, we'll see how it goes. Chapter 23. Who told you I'm going to marry your son Elwyn? I coldly sneered and looked at Caitlin with pity in my eyes. How is your family's affairs related to me? You will marry him. Once Elwyn decides something, no one can change it. He's just a lunatic. I'll just sit at home, waiting. On the day you marry into the family, I will torment the treasure that Elwyn cares about the most. Caitlin's dried up, yellowing eyes stared at me intently, and as security rushed in, she suddenly pulled out my ballpoint pen from her pocket and viciously stabbed it into her own calf. Ah! The doctor is hitting me. Dr. Vicky doesn't want to treat me, let me go. Chapter 24. Although it was lunch break, there were still many patients waiting in the corridor. Caitlin screamed and twisted, crawling around the room, which was recorded and posted online, causing a commotion. An emergency meeting was held at the hospital, unanimously deciding to suspend my work, issue a statement to calm public opinion, and await further investigation of the incident. The chief, naturally with a grim expression, disregarded my dignity, and in the ward, stopped all the doctors doing rounds to publicly announce the news. Before I could say anything, Elwyn openly scowled, slamming the stethoscope on the table. Elwyn, it's rumored that your mother is the one injured. Rest assured, Aunt is being treated in our hospital. We all understand your feelings. I will handle it. Elwyn's expression was icy, a hint of restrained anger in his deep black eyes. He repeated to me. I will handle her. I shrugged indifferently. You better. That afternoon, I packed up and went home on suspension. However, Paul's assistant was waiting downstairs for me and directly took me to attend a 5-day medical forum, a spot recommended by Qin Jingchuan. Interestingly, the hospital director sat next to me, seeing me as if he had seen a ghost. A week later, upon returning to City A, I heard the news of Caitlin intentionally harming someone and being arrested. The one who reported her was Elwyn, whose right hand she had intentionally severed. Chapter 25. I heard that Elwyn deliberately provoked Caitlin, making her believe that I was her primary physician. On the day of rounds, Caitlin took out the iron lunchbox lid she had sharpened for a long time, with malicious intent. Elwyn pushed aside the fake Alva impersonating me and, with his right hand, took a direct blow, severing arteries and nerves. Naturally, he took this opportunity to personally send Caitlin to prison. I will handle her. I won't let anyone harm you. Later, the chief and the deputy director of neurosurgery personally operated on Elwyn in the operating room for 8 hours. It was said that the postoperative effects were not as expected, and a promising surgical talent might have been lost. As a result, the hospital's attitude towards me softened, and the chief personally sent a message advising me to go to the ward to comfort Elwin. I promptly blocked him. I waited for a long time, not for the hospital to announce my innocence and allow me to return to work openly, but for this. It's truly disheartening. Is Elwin's matter related to me? Later, Alva sent a message saying her mother had brought dumplings for me from the countryside, asking me to come pick them up. I decided to go back to the hospital. As soon as I approached the office, I heard a buzzing discussion. Even though it was a public holiday, most of the office staff were present, seemingly decorating Elwin's room. Dr. Elwin, for Vicky, you've gone to great lengths, sacrificing family ties and jeopardizing your future. If I were her, I'd be deeply touched. I'm not a woman, but I envy that. I couldn't do that for my wife. Have you thought about how to propose? I'm really afraid Vicky will get too excited and faint. She'll definitely say yes, right? After a while, Elwin's voice, cool yet tinged with a hint of shyness, came through. I think she would also agree. Before I could respond, I expressionlessly pushed open the door. Chapter 26. In an instant, everyone stopped what they were doing, their gaze fixed on me. Elwin's right hand was in a cast, looking much better, dressed up carefully, holding a bouquet of roses in his hand. My least favorite flowers. The chief smiled and confidently spoke up. Vicky, the hospital will clear your name in that matter, you can rest assured. I was wronged in the first place, so of course, it needs to be cleared up. If the hospital doesn't step in, I will hold them accountable. The chief's smile faltered briefly, then he continued. Let's not talk about this on such a joyous day. In the future, you'll accompany Elwin to step back and focus on research. He didn't ruin me, so why should I step back? This time, everyone sensed the hostility in my tone, and those astute enough silently began to retreat. Elwin revealed a rare gentleness and slowly approached me. I cut him off directly. Chief, I'm here to hand in my resignation letter, please take a look. Suddenly, Elwin's face turned pale. The chief's hand trembled, and the scalding cigarette ash fell on his pants, causing a sharp pain in his thigh. You want to resign? Elwin has sacrificed so much for you, what are you thinking? I laughed coldly. Is this related to me? Did I make him do this? Are you trying to morally blackmail me? Elwin is just a madman immersed in his own world, self-righteous and self-absorbed. Is Dr. Elwin proposing? How strange, who is he proposing to? Are there any single people here? Well, not me, I have a fiancé. With that, I turned and left. Chapter 27. Elwin hesitated for a second, then immediately dropped everything and ran after me. He still held roses in his left hand, while his right hand, encased in a cast, tried to grab onto my clothes with the few fingers he could move. He lowered his gaze, almost humbly pleading with me. Can you stop? Listen to me one more time. I really love you, what more can I do for you to give me a chance? I turned calmly, my icy eyes filled with detachment. Elwin, however, seemed to have caught onto a glimmer of hope again, eagerly speaking up. I love you. I don't love you anymore. Elwin, I've thought it through and I really don't love you anymore. From the day we met until now, you've never understood my heart for a single day. You don't know what I want. You've self-righteously given everything, never asking if I needed it, if it would cause me trouble. For a whole 8 years, I've never felt loved, and I still don't now. Just like the carefully chosen roses you picked for the proposal, roses that will surely never be wrong, but are my most hated flowers. Can you all just stay away from me? Chapter 28. The day I left was also my official farewell to this hospital. Looking back from downstairs, I could faintly see Elwin's lost face at the third-floor window, as if all his strength had been drained from his body. He happened to be looking at me too, his gaunt face devoid of color, a desperate smile hanging on his lips, the once beautiful eyes now devoid of light, only emptiness remained. He stared at me for a few seconds, then covered his eyes with his hands, tears silently streaming down, trembling as he mouthed to me, "Goodbye." I calmly averted my gaze. In the parking lot ahead, a flashy Ferrari was flashing its lights, signaling to me. Paul was in the car. We had agreed to go play at Shangri-La after resigning. Despite being forcibly bound by marriage ties at home, I had asked him why he liked me. Even though we had only known each other for a few months, it shouldn't be about love. Paul gave me a meaningful look and said softly, "Uncle prefers marriage before love. If you don't mind, you can slowly teach me how to love. After all, there's still a long life ahead. But let me make it clear, I'm just a chef right now, and I only want to cook delicious meals for my little child every day, make her chubby and happy." He made me laugh. A 9-star chef worth over 100 million, his cooking should be delicious, right? It seems like it's time to start a new chapter in life.